I still remember the cold fluorescent lights in that conference room. It was a Friday afternoon and I thought I was being called in for another project update. Instead, I walked into my worst nightmare. Martin Blake, my boss, sat across from me with HR and some legal guy I'd never seen before. The air felt thick, like something terrible was about to happen. My stomach twisted into knots. "Danielle," Martin said, his voice flat and emotionless. "We have a serious problem." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails and code repository logs. My heart stopped when I saw what they were accusing me of. They claimed I'd stolen proprietary software and sold it to a competitor. The evidence looked damning, but I knew it was impossible. "This is insane," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I would never do this." Martin's face was stone cold. "The evidence speaks for itself. You're terminated immediately, with cause. No severance, no payout." The legal rep cleared his throat. "Security will escort you out." I looked toward the door and saw a security guard waiting in the hallway. My career was over, and I had no idea why. Let me take you back 2 years earlier, when this nightmare began. I was sitting in Martin's office, practically bouncing with excitement about my new idea. Our company had been struggling with a stalled government project for months, and I'd found the solution. "Martin, I've got something that could change everything," I told him, spreading my prototype diagrams across his desk. He leaned back in his chair, looking skeptical. "What are you thinking, Danielle?" I explained my revolutionary approach to data processing. It was complex, but I'd figured out how to make it work. After I showed him the early benchmarks, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is incredible," he said, leaning forward, "but it's going to take serious resources." That's when I made the deal that would haunt me forever. "I'll build this software, but I want 50% of whatever it makes. Period." Martin nodded slowly. "Deal. But let's keep this between us for now, just until it's secure." He pulled out a contract template and scribbled some notes. The legal language was confusing, but I trusted him. We shook hands, and I felt like I was about to change the world. The next 18 months were the hardest of my life. I threw everything into building that software. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I missed my sister's wedding, my best friend's birthday, and countless family dinners. My apartment became my second office. Empty coffee cups lined my desk, and I barely slept 4 hours a night. But I felt alive in a way I'd never experienced before. Every line of code was perfect, every algorithm carefully crafted. The early version was rough around the edges, but it worked beautifully. When I showed it to the team, everyone was amazed. People started talking about it in the hallways, calling it a game changer. I remember the day I submitted my latest update to the company repository. The software was finally ready for real testing. I sent Martin a message. "Project Apex is ready for demo." But when I checked my email an hour later, something felt wrong. Martin had forwarded my code to the board of directors, but my name wasn't anywhere in the message. He'd presented it as a team effort, with himself as the lead architect. I stared at my screen, wondering if I'd misunderstood something. Maybe he was just being modest. The company-wide demo was scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent days preparing, excited to finally show everyone what I'd built. This was my moment to shine. But when Martin walked into the conference room, he didn't invite me to the front. Instead, he stood at the podium and began presenting Project Apex as if it were his own creation. "This innovative platform represents months of collaborative effort," he said, clicking through slides that showed my code, my algorithms, my architecture. "My team has worked tirelessly to develop this solution." I sat in the back row, my hands shaking with disbelief. He was stealing credit for my work, right in front of everyone. When people asked technical questions, he looked directly at me for the answers, then repeated what I said as if they were his own words. After the presentation, I cornered him in the hallway. "Martin, what was that? You didn't mention my name once." He smiled that fake corporate smile. "Relax, Danielle. You'll get your credit. We just have to play the politics right now. Trust me." That night, I got an email from legal. My contributor access to the main repository was being restricted for security purposes. Something was very wrong. I started asking more questions about our original agreement. Every time I brought it up, Martin would pat my shoulder and say, "You're locked in for 50%. as long as you stay quiet and focused. But his tone made me nervous. There was something in his eyes that didn't match his words. I decided to dig deeper into the paperwork. Late one night, I accessed the company's internal legal documents. I found the contract drafts for Project Apex, and my blood ran cold. The intellectual property clause listed Martin Blake as the sole inventor and owner. My name appeared nowhere in the legal documents. According to the official records, I was just another employee who'd contributed to Martin's brilliant creation. I printed everything and took it home. My hands were shaking as I read through page after page of legal language that essentially erased my existence from the project. The next morning, I called Martin's office. "We need to talk about the IP paperwork." "What about it?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp. "My name isn't on any of the ownership documents." There was a long pause. "Don't worry about the paperwork, Danielle. Our handshake deal is what matters." But I was starting to realize that handshake deals meant nothing in corporate America. 3 months later, the company announced a massive $150 million contract with a federal agency. The deal was based entirely on my software platform. But Martin was credited as the architect and visionary behind the project. I watched the press conference from my cubicle, feeling sick to my stomach. Martin stood at the podium, shaking hands with government officials and talking about his innovative solution. "This represents a historic moment for our company," he said to the cameras. "We're proud to serve our nation with cutting-edge technology." I wasn't invited to a single meeting about the contract. I learned about the deal the same way everyone else did, through the company newsletter. A colleague stopped by my desk later that day. "Hey Danielle, congratulations on the big contract." I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, you worked on Project Apex, right? Martin said he built the core architecture himself, but I figured you must have helped somehow." My heart sank. Even my own colleagues believed Martin had created the software. He'd systematically erased me from the project's history, and now he was about to become very rich from my work. A week later, I got an email from HR about a routine compliance audit involving my code contributions. They wanted to review my Git commits and access logs from the past year. I cooperated fully, providing everything they requested. I had nothing to hide. Every line of code was legitimate, and I'd followed all company protocols. But the next day, something strange happened. My account was flagged for suspicious access to external cloud repositories. I'd never accessed any external repos from my work computer. I called the IT department immediately. "There's been a mistake. I never accessed any external repositories." The technician sounded apologetic but firm. "The logs show multiple connections to a private cloud server. We're going to need to investigate this further." I hung up the phone with a growing sense of dread. Someone was setting me up, and I had a terrible feeling I knew who it was. That evening, I backed up everything I could from my personal devices. If someone was trying to frame me, I needed to protect my evidence. The trap was more elaborate than I'd imagined. HR called me into a meeting and presented me with printed emails that supposedly came from my personal Gmail account. The messages showed me offering pieces of the software to an unknown third party. I stared at the papers in disbelief. "These are fake. I never sent these emails." The HR manager looked uncomfortable. "The IT department has confirmed these came from your workstation during work hours." "That's impossible," I said, my voice rising. "I don't even use my personal email at work." But they had IP logs, timestamps, and metadata that supposedly proved I'd sent the messages. The evidence was convincing, even though I knew it was completely fabricated. Martin sat quietly in the corner, occasionally nodding as if he was disappointed, but not surprised. His performance was perfect, the concerned boss who'd trusted an employee and been betrayed. "I'm sorry, Danielle," he said with fake sympathy. "I really thought you were better than this." I wanted to scream that he was lying, that he'd orchestrated this whole thing, but I had no proof, and the evidence against me looked overwhelming. The meeting ended with a warning. "We'll be conducting a full investigation." The investigation was swift and brutal. Word spread through the company like wildfire. People stopped talking when I walked into rooms. I heard whispers in the elevators about the security breach and the employee who went rogue. My access to internal systems was gradually restricted. First, I lost admin privileges. Then, I couldn't access the main project files. Finally, I was told to work from home while they sorted things out. The isolation was crushing. I'd built relationships with my colleagues over years of working together, and now they all suspected me of corporate espionage. I tried reaching out to friends in the office, but their responses were awkward and brief. One person I'd considered a close friend told me, "I'm sorry, but I can't be seen associating with you right now." The worst part was watching my name disappear from the company wiki. Every reference to my contributions was systematically deleted. Projects I'd led were reassigned to other people. My employee photo was removed from the website. It was like I'd never existed. Martin had found a way to erase me completely from the company's history while setting me up as the villain. The final blow came on a Friday afternoon. I was called into the same conference room where this story began. Martin, HR, and the legal representative were waiting for me with stern faces. Danielle Hartman, the legal rep, began, "You're being terminated for cause, effective immediately." They accused me of violating company policy, breaching confidentiality agreements, and attempting to sell proprietary information. The evidence against me was overwhelming, even though every piece of it was fabricated. "This is insane," I said, my voice cracking. "I built that software. I gave everything to this company." Martin shook his head sadly. "I'm disappointed, Danielle. I really trusted you. There would be no severance package, no payout from the government contract, and no references for future employment. I was being fired with cause, which meant I'd struggle to find work anywhere in the tech industry. Security escorted me out of the building like a criminal. I packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box while my former colleagues watched from their cubicles. As I walked through the lobby for the last time, I saw the framed announcement of the $150 million contract. Martin's smiling face was prominently featured as the visionary leader behind the project. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I applied for dozens of jobs, but word had spread through the industry. Potential employers would start interested, then suddenly go cold after running background checks. My savings ran out quickly. I had to move from my apartment to a tiny studio across town. I sold my car and took public transportation everywhere. The bills kept piling up while my bank account dwindled to nothing. Friends and family tried to be supportive, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Even my own mother asked, "Are you sure you didn't do something wrong?" I spent hours every day searching for work, but the rejections kept coming. One recruiter was brutally honest. "Your former employer has basically blacklisted you. I'm sorry, but I can't help you." I was nearly ready to give up when I remembered something. While cleaning out my old desk, I'd found an old USB drive that I'd forgotten about. I plugged it into my laptop and nearly cried with relief. The drive contained early versions of the software, complete with time-stamped development logs. Every file was tagged with my username and showed the progression of my work over 18 months. For the first time in months, I had hope. I took my evidence to a small law firm that specialized in employment fraud. The junior partner, Alex Thompson, was initially skeptical when I explained my situation. "Corporate wrongful termination cases are tough," he said, glancing through my paperwork. "Companies have expensive lawyers and unlimited resources." But when I showed him the time-stamped files on my USB drive, his entire demeanor changed. He spent an hour going through the code, comparing it to the official project documentation. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "You can prove you wrote every major component of the software." We spent the next 2 hours going through my evidence. I had backup files, development notes, and even screenshots of my work process. Everything pointed to me being the true creator of Project Apex. "Danielle, this isn't just wrongful termination," Alex said, his eyes bright with excitement. "This is fraud on a massive scale. They stole your intellectual property and then framed you to cover it up." He agreed to take my case on contingency. If we won, he'd take a percentage of the settlement. If we lost, I wouldn't owe him anything. "We're going to need more evidence," he warned. "But what you've shown me is a good start." Alex helped me track down former employees who might be willing to testify. The first breakthrough came from Tommy Martinez, a junior developer who'd left the company 6 months earlier. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Tommy was nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder as he spoke. I felt bad about what happened to you, he said quietly. Martin asked me to copy sections of your code and replace your name with his in the comments. My heart pounded. Did you know what he was planning? Tommy shook his head. Not at first, but one day I overheard him talking to the CTO. He said, she won't be around for the payout anyway. Would you be willing to testify about this? Tommy hesitated for a long moment. I don't want to get in trouble, but what they did was wrong. Yeah, I'll testify. We spent another hour going through the details. Tommy had kept screenshots of some of the code changes Martin had asked him to make. The evidence was damning. As we prepared to leave, Tommy grabbed my arm. There's something else. Martin created a secret Slack channel called Rewrite Apex. I think there are messages in there about removing your name from the project. Alex filed a subpoena for the company's internal communications, including the Slack channel Tommy had mentioned. The legal process was slow, but eventually we got access to the messages. What we found was even worse than I'd imagined. The Rewrite Apex channel contained months of conversations between Martin and several other managers. They'd systematically planned to steal credit for my work and eliminate me from the project. One message from Martin made me sick to my stomach. We need to scrub Danielle's name from everything. Make it look like she was just a contributor, not the architect. Another message sent just days before my termination read, the fake emails are ready. IT has planted the evidence. We can fire her whenever we want. They'd planned everything months in advance. The fake emails, the planted evidence, even the security breach that justified my termination. It was a conspiracy to steal my work and destroy my career. Alex was furious when he read the messages. This is criminal behavior. They didn't just fire you. They committed fraud. We now had enough evidence to file a serious lawsuit. But Alex warned me that the company would fight back hard. They're going to try to destroy your credibility, he said. Are you ready for that? Our next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kevin Park, a junior compliance officer at the company, contacted Alex directly. He'd heard about our investigation and wanted to come forward. We met at Alex's office on a Saturday morning. Kevin was clearly terrified, but he had information that could change everything. Martin pressured me to falsify access logs and create fake evidence, Kevin admitted. He said it was for the good of the company. Kevin had been the one who'd planted the fake emails in the system and created the false IP logs that made it look like I'd accessed external repositories. He'd kept copies of the original, unaltered files. I knew this would eventually blow up, he said, pulling out a flash drive. I documented everything Martin asked me to do. The evidence was overwhelming. Kevin had emails from Martin with specific instructions on how to frame me. He had the original, unaltered access logs that proved I'd never accessed any external systems. Why did you do it? I asked him. Kevin looked ashamed. I was scared of losing my job. Martin said if I didn't help him, he'd fire me too. I'm sorry, Danielle. I know it was wrong. With Kevin's testimony, we had proof that I'd been framed. The fake evidence that had destroyed my career was entirely fabricated. Alex filed the lawsuit in federal court. We were going after both the company and Martin personally for wrongful termination, defamation, intellectual property theft, and fraud. The legal documents were extensive, detailing every aspect of the conspiracy against me. We had the Slack messages, the falsified evidence, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Within a week, the company's legal team reached out with a settlement offer. They wanted to pay me $1.2 million and have me sign a non-disclosure agreement. It's a substantial offer, Alex told me, but I think we can do better. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. No. I don't want their money if it comes with silence. I want the truth to come out. Alex smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The company increased their offer to $2.5 million, then $4 million. Each time I refused. I wasn't interested in being bought off. I wanted justice. They're getting desperate, Alex observed. They know we have them. The case was scheduled for trial in 6 months. I spent that time preparing my testimony and gathering additional evidence. I was ready to fight. A journalist from TechCrunch caught wind of the lawsuit and published an exposé titled, the woman who built the $150 million software they tried to erase. The article laid out the entire conspiracy, complete with excerpts from the Slack messages and testimony from the witnesses. It painted a devastating picture of corporate fraud and betrayal. The response was immediate and intense. The story was shared thousands of times on social media. Other tech workers came forward with similar stories of having their work stolen by management. Within days, the Federal Trade Commission announced they were reviewing the company's practices. The Department of Defense, which had awarded the $150 million contract, launched their own investigation. Martin tried to do damage control, giving interviews where he portrayed me as a disgruntled former employee who was making false accusations. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The company's stock price plummeted. Several major clients canceled contracts. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. I watched it all unfold from my tiny studio apartment, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. I'd never wanted to destroy the company. I just wanted recognition for my work. The trial began 6 months later. The courthouse was packed with journalists, tech industry observers, and former colleagues who'd come to watch the drama unfold. Martin took the stand first, trying to portray me as an unstable employee who'd become obsessed with getting credit for work that belonged to the company. Danielle was a talented programmer, he testified, but she had delusions of grandeur. She believed she deserved more credit than she'd earned. His lawyers presented a carefully crafted narrative that painted me as a disgruntled employee who'd fabricated evidence to support a false claim. But when Alex cross-examined Martin, everything fell apart. He pulled up the Slack messages on a large screen for the jury to see. "Mr. Blake," Alex said, "did you write this message? She built the engine, but we can't let her walk away rich." Martin's face went pale. That message was taken out of context. What context would make it acceptable to conspire to steal an employee's work? The jury watched in stunned silence as Alex methodically destroyed Martin's credibility with message after message showing the conspiracy. When it was my turn to testify, I felt surprisingly calm. I'd been preparing for this moment for over a year, and I was ready to tell my story. I walked the jury through the development process, showing them the time-stamped files that proved I'd created every major component of the software. I explained how Martin had systematically erased my contributions and framed me for corporate espionage. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" one of the lawyers asked. "I trusted my boss," I said simply. I believed him when he said I'd get credit for my work. The most powerful moment came when we presented the metadata analysis. A forensic expert had examined every file in the project and traced them back to their origins. The evidence was undeniable. I had created the software. Martin's legal team tried to discredit the timestamps, claiming they could be faked. But their own expert witness admitted under oath that the evidence was authentic. "In my professional opinion," the expert said, "Ms. Hartman is the original author of this software." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up and delivered the verdict. "We find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts." The court awarded me full ownership of the software, plus $47 million in damages. The judge also ordered the company to publicly acknowledge my role as the software's creator. "This case represents a serious breach of trust," the judge said during sentencing. "Companies cannot steal their employees' work and then destroy their careers to cover it up." The courtroom erupted in cheers from the spectators. I sat in stunned silence, unable to believe it was finally over. Within hours, the company's stock price crashed by 38%. The $150 million government contract was suspended pending further review. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss the company's future. That evening, I watched the news coverage from my hotel room. Every major network was covering the story. Legal experts were calling it a landmark case for intellectual property rights. Alex called me that night. "How does it feel to be vindicated?" I thought about it for a moment. "It feels like justice," I said, but I also felt sad. The company where I'd worked for years was in ruins, and hundreds of innocent employees were going to suffer because of Martin's greed. Martin Blake was terminated from the company the next day. The The board voted unanimously to remove him from all executive positions and bar him from any future leadership roles. He was also facing criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. The district attorney's office announced they were pursuing a full investigation into his actions. Within a week, Martin was arrested at his home. The perp walk was broadcast on every news channel. I watched from my apartment, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Several other managers who'd participated in the conspiracy were also fired. The company underwent a complete leadership overhaul, but the damage was done. I received an anonymous tip that Martin was trying to launch a new company overseas using contacts from his previous job. I forwarded the information to the prosecutors handling his case. He'd destroyed my career and stolen my work, but now he was facing the consequences of his actions. The tables had completely turned. "Justice has been served," Alex told me, "but this is just the beginning of your comeback." With the legal victory behind me, I decided to reclaim my software. I registered a new company called Phoenix Technologies and relaunched the platform under the name Dataflow Pro. The software was even better than the original version. During the months of legal battles, I'd continued improving the code, adding new features and optimization routines. The tech industry was watching closely. Major companies reached out, interested in licensing the technology. Government agencies expressed interest in replacing their existing systems with my solution. Within 3 months, I had signed contracts worth $85 million. The software that had been stolen from me was now making me wealthy on my own terms. I hired several former colleagues who'd been laid off when the original company downsized. It felt good to bring talented people into an environment where they'd be respected and fairly compensated. The government agency that had awarded the original $150 million contract announced they were dropping their existing vendor and signing with Phoenix Technologies instead. Martin's scheme had backfired spectacularly. He tried to erase me, but instead he'd made me stronger and more successful than ever. 6 months after the trial, I received an email that made me laugh out loud. It was from Martin Blake, sent from what appeared to be a generic email account. "Danielle," the message read, "I want to apologize for what happened. I acted in what I believed was the company's best interest, but I realize now that I was wrong. I've learned from this experience and would like to discuss consulting opportunities with your new company." I stared at the email in disbelief. Even after everything that had happened, Martin was still trying to benefit from my success. The audacity was breathtaking. I showed the email to Alex, who was equally amazed. He's either completely delusional or incredibly desperate. I never replied to Martin's email, but I did forward it to the prosecutors handling his fraud case. They were interested in his apparent admission of wrongdoing. A few weeks later, I heard that Martin had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The judge had been particularly harsh, noting that his actions had caused severe harm to an innocent person's career and reputation. Justice had been served, but I felt no satisfaction in his downfall. I was too busy building my new company to waste time on revenge. Phoenix Technologies grew rapidly. Within a year, we'd moved from my home office to a renovated warehouse in the tech district. I hired 30 employees, all of whom shared my vision of ethical business practices and innovation. The company culture was everything my previous employer wasn't. We practiced radical transparency, fair compensation, and genuine respect for everyone's contributions. Every employee had equity in the company. I established a policy that all major technical contributions would be properly credited and rewarded. No one would ever have their work stolen the way mine had been. The Dataflow Pro platform continued to evolve, incorporating artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities. We were at the forefront of the industry, setting standards that other companies tried to match. My inbox was constantly full of interview requests from journalists and speaking invitations from industry conferences. I'd become a symbol of fighting back against corporate fraud. But the moment that meant the most to me was when I received a message from a young programmer. "Your story inspired me to stand up for my own work. Thank you for showing that justice is possible." Today, I walked through the lobby of Phoenix Technologies headquarters and stopped at the brass plaque mounted on the wall. Danielle Hartman, founder and CEO. It's been 3 years since Martin Blake fired me and tried to erase my existence. Phoenix Technologies now has over 200 employees and annual revenue exceeding $300 million. We've won numerous awards for innovation and ethical business practices. The original company that stole my work went bankrupt 18 months after the trial. Most of their talented employees found positions at other firms, including several who joined Phoenix Technologies. I still have the old USB drive that contained the evidence that saved my career. It sits in a frame on my desk, a reminder of how close I came to losing everything. Sometimes former colleagues ask me if I'm bitter about what happened. The truth is, I'm not. Martin Blake thought that firing me would erase me from history. Instead, it forced me to become stronger, more determined, and ultimately more successful than I ever imagined possible. He tried to steal my work, destroy my reputation, and end my career. But he failed. I'm not just successful, I'm unforgettable. The software that was supposed to make him rich is now making me wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. And every day I get to walk into an office where people are valued, respected, and fairly compensated for their contributions. Martin Blake thought he could erase me. Instead, he made me legendary.